Part 18. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 171. Mom. Ji Yufeng and Ji Yu saw the tragic scene of their mother being shot and falling to the ground, and they cried and knelt on the ground. I will fight you. The middle-aged man saw his wife falling in a pool of blood, and in grief, he rushed to the gangster man holding a gun. The gangster man saw the middle-aged man rushing towards him, and he was not surprised but happy, with a grim smile on his face. The men around him stepped forward to stop the middle-aged man, and the gangster man slowly stepped forward and raised his pistol. Without pulling the trigger, the man swung the gun stiffly and hit the middle-aged man's head violently. 1, 2, 3. At first, the middle-aged man wailed in pain, but as he swung more and more times, the shouting in the middle-aged man's mouth gradually subsided. Blood flowed from his forehead, and in the end, the middle-aged man was already on the verge of death and his dejected expression. The gangster had a lot of fun fighting, and waved his sore wrist, with a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. The gangster suddenly picked up a baseball bat on the table and swung it at the middle-aged man's head. Brain and blood splattered on the ground, and the middle-aged man's body fell to the ground in a bloody mess, causing the survivors around to scream. Dad. Ji Yufeng was heartbroken and ran towards the decapitated body with all his might. The gangster next to him showed disdain and threw Ji Yufeng aside like throwing garbage. The leading gangster stepped on Ji Yufeng's forehead and said sarcastically, Master Ji, a lazy second-generation ancestor, what are you without your father who is the director? The force from his feet became stronger and stronger, and Ji Yufeng's glasses shattered instantly, his white suit was dirty, and his cheeks were already stained with blood that had flowed on the ground. Your father has a strong character, why don't you follow him to die? The gangster man spitted on Ji Yufeng's face. Looking at Ji Yufeng who was like a drowned dog, the gangster man suddenly felt bored. Ji Yufeng's vision was blurred, and the mocking and scolding of the gangsters came to his ears. In the haze, Ji Yufeng lay on the ground, trembling and stretching out his bloody arm. Desperately stretched out his hand, as if he wanted to grab something, but what he touched was a pile of hard-colored crystal cores. The gangster man turned his eyes to Ji Yu who was shivering in the corner. The woman inherited her mother's genes, with a pure appearance, tall figure and full breasts that were about to burst out. I almost forgot there was a young one here. Just let me have a taste. The gangster man threw the pistol to his men, stretched out his hands into claws, and walked slowly towards Ji Yu with an evil look and a wretched face. No, don't come over here. Ji Yu staggered backwards, but there was a narrow corner behind her, and she had no way to avoid it. The desperate woman fell to the ground, waving her arms weakly. But the woman's struggling appearance made the gangster man's eyes full of lust, and he stepped forward. All of this was seen by the survivors around him, but no one dared to stop him. They had already become numb in this lawless apocalypse, and would not meddle in other people's business if it did not concern them. Boss, boss. What's wrong? Just as the gangster was about to step forward and knock Ji Yu down, he heard a cry from his men beside him. His interest was interrupted, and the gangster looked back unhappily, but saw the horrified expression of his men. He. The gangster looked in the direction his men pointed, but saw Ji Yufeng kneeling at the corner of the table in a tattered white suit. There was still blood flowing under his body. Ji Yufeng was facing down, as if he was chewing something, and there was a crisp sound between his lips and teeth. As his sight got closer, the gangster finally saw clearly what Ji Yufeng was chewing. It was a crystal core. What he was chewing in his mouth was actually the mutant crystal core they had collected with great effort. The crystal cores mixed with blood and tears were scattered on the ground, but Ji Yufeng didn't care about the blood stains on them at all, and madly stuffed the crystal cores on the ground into his mouth. Countless crystal cores were swallowed by him, and the violent mutant energy impacted his fragile internal organs and limbs. The radiation produced by the mutant energy gradually dyed his black hair into snow white. At the same time, Ji Yufeng's figure also underwent some subtle changes. A strong energy burst out from his body, and the terrifying energy fluctuations made many human survivors terrified. Ji Yufeng stood up, his body was covered with bright red blood, his messy white hair was swaying, and he lowered his head. The next moment, a pair of cold eyes looked at the many gangsters who were full of horror. The latter swallowed his saliva and shouted to his men. "There is something fishy, let's get rid of this kid first." Many gangsters waved guns and sticks to attack Ji Yufeng in front of him. The latter stood in place and released an amazing space fluctuation when he raised his hand. From this moment on, the once ignorant and unlearned young master disappeared, replaced by the ruthless law and indifferent White Death. In the dim illusion space, Ji Yufeng's figure swayed and knelt on the ground, the fallen lens shattered on the ground, and his expression was dazed. Suddenly, a clear laugh came to Ji Yufeng's heart like a huge bell. "I never thought that the famous White Death would have such a past." Mu Qiu, wearing a black windbreaker, put his hands in his pockets and walked slowly towards Ji Yufeng, who was kneeling on the ground with a smile on his face. Unlike in the past, a red butterfly was circling around Mu Qiu's shoulder at this time. Hearing Mu Qiu's words, the latter looked stunned. Being in the space of illusion, he could not distinguish between illusion and reality for a moment. Ji Yufeng, wearing glasses that were broken like spider webs, slowly stood up from the ground with an empty expression. "Interesting, your story is really wonderful." Just like watching an interesting movie, Mu Qiu walked towards Ji Yufeng and clapped his hands lightly with a smile on his face. When Mu Qiu walked in front of Ji Yufeng, he did not stop, but continued to move forward, like a stranger on a road. The black and white figures passed by each other, but Ji Yufeng heard Mu Qiu's meaningful teasing words. "I hope you won't let me down in the future, I'm looking forward to your performance. Goodbye, Mr. Death." The familiar voice was full of a certain playfulness and pride, as if it was an old friend who hadn't seen him for a long time. Ji Yufeng's pupils suddenly shrank, and he glanced at Mu Qiu's back with horror. At this moment, Mu Qiu's back and a certain figure in his mind slowly overlapped, and finally superimposed together, as if they were a whole. Ji Yufeng's dry lips opened and closed, and he slowly spoke in a voice that only he could hear. "Shura. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord." Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 172. In the dim space, Ji Yufeng's figure gradually faded and merged into the black curtain behind him. Mu Qiu, dressed in black, walked slowly in the silent space, and the originally dark space around him gradually turned into a purple light curtain. Tianlai Novel Network. Mu Qiu, who witnessed all these strange changes, was not in a hurry, and walked forward a few steps leisurely. Finally, Mu Qiu paused and stopped somewhere in the purple ripple space, looking up with a smile on his face. After a while, the purple light curtain in front of Mu Qiu suddenly rippled. A figure of a purple-robed man emerged from it, and a wicked laugh came out of his mouth. He. You can break my magic mirror so easily. It seems that Lord Bingjun has hidden a lot of secrets." The purple-robed man's words seemed casual, but in fact he was already shocked. Even the White Death God was deeply trapped in his illusion and couldn't extricate himself, but this new Ice King actually broke it without any pressure. Even for spiritual awakeners of the same level, it would take a long time to break the spiritual illusion set up by the purple-robed man. Although he didn't know what method Mu Qiu used, his fear of Mu Qiu had risen to a higher level. Mu Qiu looked up at the mysterious purple-robed man. "I always don't like others to hide their heads and show their faces." Somehow, when Mu Qiu looked up at him, the purple-robed man suddenly felt a chill on his back. This feeling was as if he was stared at by the red eyes of a peerless beast in the ruins. Since the goal has been achieved, then I will leave first. Lord Bingjun, let's meet again." The purple-robed man's voice was hoarse, and an old face was vaguely visible under the hood. As the purple-robed man finished speaking, his figure floating in the air gradually dimmed. Looking at Miu standing in front of him, who seemed to have no movement, the purple-robed man breathed a sigh of relief unconsciously. The purple-robed man always felt that if he continued to stay here, something terrible would happen. But just when he was about to use his supernatural power to leave this illusionary space, he suddenly felt his body stagnate. What's going on? The purple-robed man was horrified to find that he could not leave this illusionary space that he had set up himself. As if he was imprisoned, his whole body was frozen in this space. The purple-robed man looked at the black-clothed man standing still on the ground with a look of horror. Miu chuckled and said, "Of course, I don't like people who pretend to be cool and then run away." As he spoke, Miu tapped his feet lightly, and the purple space under his feet actually stirred up waves like water ripples. Hard network and space boundary. In an instant, the space they were in changed dramatically. The originally deep purple light curtain turned into a light blue geometric space. Feeling the changes in the surrounding environment, the purple-robed man's heart suddenly stirred up thousands of waves, as if falling into an ice cave. The next second, the smiling black-clothed man flashed to the side of the purple-robed man. Miu clamped the purple-robed man's neck with one hand, lifted him up in the air, narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Now, can we talk?" The purple-robed man only felt an irresistible momentum rushing towards him, and before he could make any move, he was already clamped by Miu. "Ahem, Yu Hai Bingjun, it seems that everyone underestimates you." The purple-robed man's throat was clamped, and his voice became more hoarse and low, and his voice trembled slightly. Obviously, his mood at the moment was not calm. Just from the move that Miu just showed, whether it was mental power or speed and strength, it was far beyond the white death god Ji Yufeng, who was also S-level. Miu stared at the purple-robed old man in front of him. The next moment, a gust of invisible wind swept across the corner of his clothes and lifted the purple-robed man's hood. Inside was a face of an old man that had never been seen before. The gray hair was blown away by the wind, the old face was full of spots, the wrinkled skin was shriveled, and the complexion was sallow, just like an old man who was about to die. This was an extremely unfamiliar look, but Miu stared at it for a long time. The purple-robed old man smiled. He, could it be that Lord Bingjun saw that I didn't have much time left and planned to let me go? But Miu raised the corner of his lips and said, "The triangular cat trick." Miu's hand holding the purple-robed man's neck suddenly shook. The purple-robed man's old face suddenly twisted strangely, just like a wave on the calm water. Then, under the effect of a fierce spiritual energy, the purple-robed man's face cracked like a lens. Under the face that was cracked like a spider web, a charming face suddenly appeared in front of Miu. When he saw this face, even Miu's eyes flashed with surprise. Lu Qianqian. At this moment, the identity of the mysterious purple-robed person was finally revealed. She turned out to be the socialite sought after by thousands of people in the search team, the goddess figure in Yuhei base Lu Qianqian, who was regarded as a mortal enemy by Wei Linger. Speaking of which, when Miu first came to the base, Lu Qianqian had invited Miu to join her team. She even made a name for herself in the battle to eliminate the alien cult in Lannan City later. I never thought that this seemingly charming and enchanting woman was actually a heretic who was hated and resented by the world. Miu narrowed his eyes slightly. If he remembered correctly, the ability that Lu Qianqian awakened was the nine-tailed fox of the special mutation system, and the strength she showed in front of people was only B-level. And looking at her previous series of methods, Lu Qianqian's strength has definitely reached the S-level. Her identity was exposed by Miu, but Lu Qianqian did not look panicked at all. She only saw her jade fingers outline and gently stroked Miu's cheek. "You are worthy of being the Ice Lord of Yuhei. You discovered my identity so easily. You are really meticulous. So, what are you going to do next? The woman's face is charming, her cheeks are rosy, and the beauty mole under the corner of her eye adds a bit of enchantment to her. Lu Qianqian stretched out her bare hands, held Mu Qiu's cheeks, and looked at her lovingly. After all, here, I have no power to resist. The illusion around her was broken, and the woman's graceful figure was also fully displayed under the outline of the purple robe. Slender waist, plump figure, with her rosy face, watery eyes. There is no doubt that this is a beauty in the world. Mu Qiu's eyes flashed with a playful look, but the arm that pinched Lu Qianqian's neck suddenly exerted force. A huge force came from her throat, and Lu Qianqian's face instantly became painful. I rarely hit women, but this doesn't mean I won't kill women. Mu Qiu still had a squinting smile, but the words he said made Lu Qianqian feel deeply desperate. Feeling the smooth touch of his fingertips, Mu Qiu smiled and said, "If you can't tell me the information that satisfies me today, then you will die here." Mu Qiu also felt a little interested in the mysterious heterogeneous religion. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 173. A bunch of trash. So many people are coming together and you can't stop one person. After the banquet, Wang Deipen came to a dark alley. The subordinates who were well prepared immediately reported the specific information to Wang Deipen. When he learned that hundreds of people had joined forces to capture the bandage killer, but they had not been caught yet, Wang Deipen was furious. Bandage killer repeatedly provoked him, the Shenglong Society, and even massacred many senior members of the Shenglong Society. All these actions were a slap in Wang Deipen's face. "Boss, don't worry, we will send more manpower. Tonight we will definitely." "No." Wang Deipen's eyes showed a fierce look and he shouted sharply. "I want to see for myself who is so brave and dares to go against my Dragon Society." Wang Deipen's dark complexion was slightly red, and in his fierce eyes, there seemed to be infinite fire burning. In the light blue heart network space, Lu Qianqian's hands were bound by invisible shackles and raised high above her head. Her slim purple robe showed off her slim figure. Perhaps it was because she had been imprisoned for too long, but sweat flowed from Lu Qianqian's forehead and stained her hair, making her look really pitiful and touching. But even with such a stunning beauty in front of her, Mu Qiu had a look of contemplation on her face. He was still thinking about the information Lu Qianqian just said. From Lu Qianqian's mouth, Mu Qiu learned a lot of secret information about the heterogeneous religion. As a cult in the eyes of the world, the heterogeneous religion never appears on the bright side, but there are shadows of the heterogeneous religion in many human bases. They relied on verbal inducements to lure frustrated human survivors to join, thereby expanding the scale of the pagan religion. For example, the color of the robe Lu Qianqian wears also divides her status. The lowest level of heretic cultists wear gray robes during secret meetings. This type of heretic cultists are often ordinary people or low-level superpowers who have just awakened their superpowers and have little strength. The status of black robes in the heterogeneous religion is slightly higher, and most of them are C-level and D-level awakened ones with average strength. When an awakened person reaches A-level strength and completes a series of tasks, he or she is qualified to be promoted to purple robe. And above the purple robe is the more powerful red robe. As far as Lu Qianqian knows, there are as many as 12 members of the red-robed heterogeneous cult. And every one of them is a being that has surpassed S-level. 12 immortal priests. Mu Qiu murmured to himself. This is the title of the 12 mysterious red-robed alien believers. Mu Qiu underestimated the energy of this alien church. There were as many as 12 destruction-level characters among them. Tianlai Novel Network. Mu Qiu looked at Lu Qianqian and said. If I remember correctly, that Su Feng is the red robe, right? But his strength is far from the level of destruction. Mu Qiu remembered that the vampire Su Feng was not even strong among S levels, and Ji Yufeng was no match for Su Feng even if he was one against all. Heterologism does have a red robe responsible for supervising the Yuhei base and nearby areas, but it is definitely not a role like Su Feng. Lu Qinqin's eyes showed disdain. Su Feng is far from qualified. Mu Qiu's eyes flashed. Who is it? Lu Qianqian shook her head. I don't know either. The identity of the 12 immortal priests of the pagan cult is secretive, but they are never disclosed to the public. They also use projections to convey information. They may be senior personnel of various bases, or awakened people in the team, or even the most ordinary human survivors at the grassroots level. Mu Qiu nodded. From Lu Qianqian, he did learn many secrets of the heterogeneous religion. As for whether it was true or false, it was up to him to judge by himself. He suddenly looked at Lu Qianqian and asked, "Aren't you afraid that I will be detrimental to your heterogeneous religion if you reveal the organization's secrets like this?" These words are both a question and a temptation. After hearing Mu Qiu's words, Lu Qianqian no longer looked like she was teasing her before. She clenched her teeth tightly, with a look of unknown resentment on her face. "I wish you could crush them all to ashes." Lu Qinqin's expression was indignant, and there was a vague sense of resentment mixed with hatred in her pupils, which seemed to be somewhat unspeakable. Mu Qiu did not pursue the question. He had no curiosity about the private life of the Jade Sea Goddess. Lu Qianqian raised her head and looked at Mu Qiu, with a bit of bitterness in her smile. "Kill me." Mu Qiu shook her head and chuckled. "If you plan to win my sympathy like this, you are totally wrong. However, I do intend to let you go." Mu Qiu raised her arm, a flash of red fire flashed, and she pointed at the plump part of the woman's chest. Lu Qianqian said, and her face turned slightly red. Feelings of shame and anger surged into my heart, but what followed was a sharp burning sensation in my heart. It was as if a hot flame was burning in her heart, and then the flame quickly spread to the blood throughout her body. For a moment, Lu Qianqian felt as if she was in a hellish oil cauldron, with endless fire cooking her body. The feeling of intense heat that made her blood vessels burn with steam made her suffer. Large amounts of sweat dripped down from her forehead like pillars, and even her skin showed some unnatural redness. Until Mu Qiu snapped his fingers, the burning sensation in his body disappeared in an instant, as if the pain he had just experienced was an illusion. His body fell to the ground, and Lu Qianqian woke up from a dream. For the first time, she looked at the man in front of her with fear. The means used by Mu Qiu were too terrible. After the pain she had just experienced, Lu Qianqian even felt that death was a luxury for her. Mu Qiu smiled. "This is the fire I planted in your body. You just experienced the feeling of it being aroused. And when I detonate it, your body will also." Mu Qiu stretched out his fingers, and his index finger and thumb made an opening and closing motion. Without saying anything more, Mu Qiu made a silent gesture and turned away. Lu Qianqian is a smart person. Such smart people are always selfish. She knows what to do at what time. The sirens in the Yuhei base were blaring, and even some streets were flashing with lights as bright as daylight. The strange bandaged figure kept shuttling through the streets, and the blood flowing on his body had dyed the originally white bandages red. Behind him, hundreds of Shenglonghui and the guard team were working together to hunt the bandaged killer. The bandaged killer's figure was obviously not as fast as before, and it could be seen that the bandaged killer was already struggling to survive. The whole arrest operation was about to come to an end. The night covered by dark clouds had a strange blood-red color. On the top of a high-rise building above the base, a man in a black robe looked down. It was a white figure with blood stains. A clear female voice like a nightingale sounded in his ears. "Brother, do you really want to save her?" Mu Qiu did not speak, but there was a playful look on the corner of his mouth. Suddenly, in the dark void in front of him, a hideous mask with a green face and fangs emerged. The girl understood what he meant and immediately laughed out loud. "Brother, you are so bad. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord." Author, Mocnu. Chapter 174. Chase him, he can't run away. When we catch him, I will skin him alive. Countless insults filled the streets. Hundreds of Shenglonghui thugs with blue tattoos chased after a figure in front of them. At this moment, the bandage killer was already at the end of his strength, and the white bandages were stained with blood. The owner of the blood could no longer tell whether it was himself or someone he killed on the way to escape. The sticky feeling of blood came from the body where the bandages bound the body, and the severe pain from the wounds constantly stimulated the nerves. But the bandage killer's exposed red eye spread extreme madness and morbid murderous intent. An awakened person holding a steel knife rushed towards the bandage killer like an arrow. The latter's eyes glowed red, and a bunch of white bandages with a metallic luster shot out from behind him. The sound of golden swords hitting each other came from mid-air. With a click sound, the steel knife made of special materials was cut off by the bandage in an instant. Then, the sharp bandage like a steel blade cut off the 5 fingers of the knife holder. The awakened person holding the knife immediately let out a shrill scream, but before his throat closed, a gust of wind came to his ears. The terrified awakened person turned his head hurriedly, and saw the killer with his arm wrapped in bandages like a hand knife and blood in his eyes. A line of blood splashed in the sky, and the head of the awakened person holding the knife had already fallen to the ground. However, at this moment, a silver-white bullet drew a flash of lightning in the air, and hit the bandaged killer's chest at the moment when the awakened person holding the knife fell. Almost subconsciously, the bandaged killer raised his arm wrapped in a sharp bandage to block his chest. But the armor-piercing bullet spun several times in the air, directly piercing a bloody hole in the bandaged killer's arm. The bandage killer groaned, and there was a sharp pain in his arm, and the wound at the root of his thigh broke again. Even the bandage killer with amazing perseverance could not hold on at this moment, and his body staggered and fell to the ground. At the same time, a red light flashed in front of him, and the sirens sounded. I saw a row of guards in black uniforms and armed with live ammunition had arrived in front, and the black muzzles of their guns were pointing at the bandage killer who fell to the ground. And the violent roar of motorcycles came from the dark alley behind the killer, and hundreds of thugs from the Shenlong Society followed closely. The team of hundreds of people surrounded the bandage killer in a circle, and there was no escape. "Give up, you have no way to escape," a member of the guard team shouted. In fact, the bandage killer killed so many survivors in the base, and most of them were awakened fighters with superpowers. He had already committed an unforgivable crime. And now the reason they want to capture him alive is to find out the true face of the bandage killer and his purpose of causing chaos in the base. The bandage killer leaned against the wall, staring at everyone with a single red eye. Everyone heard a faint snort. Then, countless silver-white bandages with a blade-like luster suddenly burst out from the bandage killer's body, attacking indiscriminately in all directions like a tornado. The sharp bandage blades scraped wildly in the encirclement, and everyone touched by the silver-white meat grinder had their bodies shattered. Even the awakened were not spared, and for a moment, the broken meat and blood gushed out, converging together into a hellish blood river. Before dying, everyone vaguely heard a woman's low laughter in their ears, like a ghost in hell asking for life. "Die for me." Suddenly, a huge ball of scorching fire broke out from a distance in the dark night sky. I saw a figure with crimson flames all over his body falling from the sky like a meteor. The dark body had cracks like lava, and the originally thin figure had grown several times larger. A huge red dragon appeared on his back, extending to his shoulders, and the scorching fire was rising like flowing magma. The man was the leader of the Shenlong Society, Wang Daipen, one of the 3 destructive forces of Yuhei, known as the Scorching Sun. The scorching flames like the scorching sun instantly burned all the jagged bandages of the meat grinder into ashes. The surrounding land even burned huge pits under the scorching flames. The last trick of the bandage killer was easily resolved with the arrival of Wang Daipen. The surviving Shenlong society thugs around looked at Wang Daipen's tall figure like a world destroyer with joy, and shouted cheers one after another. The appearance of Wang Daipen made them completely relieved. The bandage killer will definitely die tonight. Wang Daipen's whole body was baptized by magma, and even his face was full of deep red cracks like magma. He slowly walked towards the bandage killer who fell to the ground, with a hideous smile on his face. I don't care who you are. If you dare to provoke my Shenlong society, I will grind you to ashes even if you are the king of heaven. Wang Daipen raised his arms, which were wrapped in magma like the roots of an old tree, and a ball of magma as hot and dazzling as the scorching sun burst out. As Wang Daipen's voice fell, the huge burning sun condensed by crimson flames hit the bandage killer in the corner like a meteorite. Tianlai Novel Network. Everyone who was close to the burning sun felt their skin cracked, as if they were about to melt, not to mention the bandage killer who was hit by the huge burning sun. As the burning sun kept getting closer, the dazzling flames also made the murderous intent in the eyes of the bandage killer gradually fade. Strangely, even though death was approaching, there was no fear in the eyes of the bandage killer. There was a sense of relief, pleasure in his expression. However, at this moment, a dark curtain of light suddenly appeared in front of the bandage killer. In the black hole that was like a huge mouth of the abyss, a huge black flame also surged out from it, condensing into the shape of a huge python in the air. The black flame python, wrapped in monstrous black air, collided with the swooping sun, and the colors of black and red were reflected in the entire night. The originally silent night sky was instantly ignited by the boiling flames. The air around the Yuhei base seemed to have risen several degrees. Then, everyone subconsciously looked up into the sky, and what they saw was a shocking scene of black and red poles dividing the night sky. In the night sky covered by black flames, a shirtless figure with black devil wings on his back and a red-faced, fanged masked figure hovered before everyone's eyes. Shiu, Shura, it's Shura. The thugs who were besieging the bandage killer on the ground finally recognized the identity of the figure that made them shudder. Countless people looked up at the dark figure in the sky in horror. This is their eternal nightmare. Eternal night Shura. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 175. If you want to name a name of fear that many survivors of Yuhei base will never forget, the most common answer must be the mysterious Evernight organization and the terrifying Black Flame Shura. The terrorist organization that calls itself the Eternal Night Dynasty is the only terrorist force that dares to openly invade Yuhei base since the base was built. Even the alien cult that the world hates dares not invade Yuhei base openly. But the Evernight organization did it, and finally disappeared without a trace. And so far, this terrible organization has only revealed the tip of its iceberg. Its commander-in-chief, Shura alone, has the terrifying Black Flame ability. Even the White Death is not his opponent. Later, the destruction level Wang Daipen failed to stop him. And now, the nightmare deep in the hearts of many survivors has appeared again in Yuhei base. Shura, that Shura is back. The Evernight organization has invaded again. Countless people looked up at the black figure in the sky, terrified and horrified. At this moment, they had already forgotten about the bandage killer, and their minds were full of thoughts about how to escape. Shura. On the ground, Wang Daipen's body instantly erupted with hotter flames, and the cracks all over his body seemed to be boiling with volcanic magma. The surrounding ground had been burned by the flames, and the rising steam spread everywhere. He would never forget the scene of fighting with Shura before, when the latter was as good as him with S-level strength, and disappeared as if nothing had happened afterwards. Haha, long time no see, little turkey. Shura still looked extremely arrogant, with contempt in his deep red pupils, and his words were also with a playful smile. Looking for death. Since he became the leader of Shenglonghui, he has never been ridiculed so contemptuously. Wang Deipen swung his right arm, and a thick column of fire like magma came across the sky in the direction of Shura. At the same time, Wang Deipen's feet were filled with flames, and he turned into a flaming meteor and flashed towards the masked Shura. This time, he must take down this Shura. The long whip-like fire column flew over, but Shura's figure hovered in the air without moving, with a scornful smile in the corner of his eyes. A deep black light suddenly rose in front of Shura. The sky-high fire column was torn apart by the black light the moment it touched the black light. The hot fire column turned into two flames and sprayed to both sides, but bypassed Shura's figure. The black light dissipated, and a black sword with black flames swirling on it appeared in front of Shura. At the same time, Wang Deipen, who was covered with magma, had flashed in front of Shura. The huge and hot molten fist blasted directly at Shura's head. Shura drew out the black flame sword in front of him, and the pitch-black blade wrapped in black flames collided with Wang Deipen's molten fist when he waved his hand. In an instant, black and red flames gushed out, and the surrounding space seemed to be burned and distorted by the scorching flames. The dazzling sparks splashed, reflecting the grim faces of Ghost-Face Shura and Wang Deipen gritting their teeth. The black flames from the depths of the netherworld collided with the hot molten magma burning the scorching sun. The night sky above the Yuhei base seemed to be divided, and this shocking scene stunned the people below. Shura got stronger. Quick, go and ask for help. The many humans below finally reacted, and the people of Shenglonghui and the guards moved to leave. But the next second, the shadows under them twisted. I saw a series of black-clothed ninjas with ink-like bodies emerging from the ground, holding weapons and looking at the many survivors in front of them with red eyes. After a moment, bright red blood spurted onto the ground like a fountain, and countless withered and skinny corpses fell to the ground, their pupils full of horror. The two black and red figures in the sky kept colliding like lightning. Wang Deipen's molten fist swung more and more fiercely, and the shock in his heart became stronger and stronger. This Shura was even stronger than the last time he came into contact with him. At that time, Shura already had the top strength of the peak of S level. Now he can hold his own even in a head-on confrontation with himself. Wang Deipen's anger rose steadily, and the red dragon tattooed behind him seemed to come alive, with blood gushing out. The energy emanating from his body became stronger and stronger. He hadn't used all his strength yet. Finally, after a certain moment in the fight, Shura's sword flipped, and the black air wrapped around it climbed onto Wang Deipen's body along his fist. Wang Deipen instantly felt that part of the flame on his body was sucked away by this strange black air. Startled, Wang Deipen's feet burst into flames, and he retreated backwards, cautiously looking at the eternal night Shura in front of him, who was wrapped in black flames. He felt the destructive aura above the black air that just devoured people. The latter laughed deeply under his red mask, and a domineering and terrifying aura shook out like a wave. The many survivors below were frightened by this terrifying aura that seemed to be real, and looked at Shura standing in the air in fear. Even Wang Deipen failed to defeat him. But what no one expected was that the latter flapped his black wings and slowly landed in front of the bandage killer. Countless dark ninja figures appeared around him and knelt down in front of Shura. Shura looked at Wang Deipen, who was looking livid in the distance, and laughed wildly. "Scorching sun, is this all you can do?" Then, the ferocious face with red face and fangs looked around, and no one dared to look at him. "Pray for all living beings, the night will eventually fall." As Shura's voice fell, a dark light curtain suddenly appeared under Shura and many black-clothed ninjas again. The next second, Shura and the bandage killer disappeared. The terrified people looked at each other, unable to recover for a long time. They didn't expect that the Evernight organization, which always appeared in big moves, disappeared so quickly this time. Is that bandage killer a member of the Evernight dynasty? In the boundless dark space, the bandage killer fell to the ground with a sway. Bright red blood flowed down from the bandages. He didn't even have the strength to struggle. A huge, hot black flame exploded out of thin air in the darkness in front of the bandage killer. A red-faced, fanged, and sturdy perfect figure walked out of the rolling black flame's eternal night Shura. The wide demon wings were still shrouded in layers of black air, and the majestic black flame energy showed his absolute dominance. Shura slowly walked in front of the bandage killer, and an invisible energy scattered. The bandages tightly wrapped around the latter's body completely dissipated at this moment, revealing the seductive body inside. The smooth and tender skin was stained with a trace of blood, but it added a bit of charm to his proud figure. And when the bandages binding the head were removed, a beautiful and delicate face appeared in front of Shura. If the survivors of the Yuhei base saw this face, they would be shocked. Because this bandage killer who killed countless people and was terrifying was actually the dream lover of countless awakened people in Yuhei base, the angel in white, Lu Qingfei. But different from the past, Lu Qingfei's body was now covered with blood, and her originally clear pupils still had a trace of bloodthirstiness that had not faded. At the moment when the bandages fell, Lu Qingfei's bloodthirsty eyes became flustered, and she covered her vital parts with horror, trying her best to hide the exposed spring light that made people have infinite reverie. At this time, the bloodthirsty and murderous bandage killer seemed to have some of the appearance of the angel in white in the past. Lu Qingfei looked at the Shura figure wrapped in black flames in front of her in panic. But the latter's next move completely stunned Lu Qingfei. "Miss Lu, it's really rare to see you like this." The mysterious Shura in front of her actually slowly took off his mask, revealing a face that Lu Qingfei was extremely familiar with. "Mu Qiu." Lu Qingfei's eyes were filled with horror, and she couldn't help but cover her face with her hands and look at the handsome face in front of her with a smile. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 176. Then, that Shura is back again. The Eternal Night Organization has invaded the base, quickly report to the superiors. Guardian, where are the other two guardians in the base? Noisy voices rose and fell in the streets, and the piercing sirens resounded throughout the base. Countless survivors were awakened by the noise and alarms in the middle of the night. When they heard that the terrifying Eternal Night Organization had invaded the base again, they all looked terrified and hid in a hurry, fearing that those terrifying black-clothed ninjas would find them. It's terrible, that Shura's strength has become stronger, and now even President Wan can't do anything to him. Those black-clothed ninjas have appeared again, quickly ask the law enforcement team to come to support. A team of guards ran past in a hurry, with anxious looks on their faces. However, just as the guards ran past the alley, a vague figure slowly walked out of the alley, holding the wall. The moonlight shone down, reflecting Ji Yufeng's face. But at this moment, Ji Yufeng looked very different from the way he had appeared in front of the world before. For some reason, his neat suit had become dirty and wrinkled, and even the two lenses of his black-framed glasses were all broken. If other people saw this scene, they would definitely be shocked, as they rarely saw Ji Yufeng in such an embarrassed state. Ji Yufeng leaned against the wall, and he also heard the conversation between several guards just now. But the captain of the law enforcement team did not make any move. His expression was blurred under the broken mirror screen, but the lenses glowed silver under the bright moonlight. After a while, Ji Yufeng seemed to feel something, and suddenly raised his head to look at the distant sky. At the same time, a loud noise suddenly broke out at the edge of the distant sky. I saw a group of hot crimson sun rising from the flat ground, and smashing into the earth like a falling meteor. Suddenly, a deep black hole abyss emerged from the depths of the earth, and a ferocious python made of black flames rushed out and rushed straight to the crimson sun. The black flame python collided with the crimson sun in the night sky, making a shocking sound. Then came the terrifying pressure like a raging wave accompanied by the scorching flames. The natural disaster-like scene made countless survivors on the street flee in all directions, shouting constantly. The wailing of human survivors came from outside the alley, and Ji Yufeng leaned against the alley entrance and turned a deaf ear. He just looked up and stared at the strange sound in the night sky in the distance, stunned. After another half a while, the famous white death god of Yuhei base lowered his head, leaned against the wall and disappeared into the deep dark alley. Is that the eternal night Shura that has been rumored in recent days? On a tall building not far from where Shura and Wang Deipen were fighting fiercely, a man in blue combat uniform was holding a telescope, watching the battle in the distance. Gradually, under the fierce collision of black and red, the night sky was divided into two colors, and the air was filled with a burning sensation. Hianping put down the telescope and sighed. No wonder the message conveyed to us by Yuhei base emphasized the Yanjai organization. This Shura is really strong. The team member next to him stepped forward and said. Then Captain, our plan. Hianping raised his hand, execute according to the original plan. Hianping narrowed his eyes and raised the telescope again to look at the black and red night in the distance. Mu Qiu, how could it be you? Lu Qingfei fell to the ground, looking at the familiar face under the mask, and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. She never thought that the Yanjai Shura, who was feared by countless people in the base, turned out to be the Yuhei Bingjun who was expected by everyone to become the next guardian. Why, are you surprised? Mu Qiu still had a spring breeze-like smile on his face, and asked back. I should be surprised. The white angel that everyone in the base yearns for turns out to be a bandage killer who kills without blinking an eye. Wow, Miss Lu really impressed me. After saying that, Mu Qiu, shirtless and showing off his strong muscles, looked at the white and plump attractive body in front of him unscrupulously. Mu Qiu's words directly awakened Lu Qingfei from her shock. The latter showed a look of grief on her face and subconsciously lowered her head. Don't look at me. My hands are already covered with blood. 2 lines of tears slid down Lu Qingfei's cheeks. The woman grabbed her messy long hair with both hands, and her face was haggard. She had long lost herself in the endless killing. As long as she closed her eyes, she could recall the cruel scenes when she was killing. But she couldn't suppress her desire for killing. Whenever she felt the bright red and warm blood spurting out of the fresh flesh, and the fear and despair of people before death, she would feel an addictive morbid pleasure in her heart. Looking at the woman crying at her feet, Mu Qiu's mouth curled up. From Lu Qianqian, Mu Qiu learned about another ability of Lu Qingfei, killing blood demons. This Lu Qingfei turned out to be an awakener of twin abilities. According to Lu Qianqian, Lu Qingfei's killing ability has great potential. She can absorb the fear and resentment of the enemy while killing and feed back to herself. The breath of fresh blood will also stimulate the ability user, and the accumulation of murderous aura will also cause the ability user's superpower to rise rapidly. This is also the real reason why Lu Qingfei can quickly upgrade from a medical ability user to a high-level A-level bandage killer. To be precise, this is the first true twin superpower user that Mu Qiu has met. But Lu Qingfei has been suppressing the awakening of another superpower in her body. The alien source cult found her just to boost the waves through simple stimulation, and in just a few months, it created a terrifying killing demon. I can't go back. Lu Qingfei grabbed the black empty ground under her feet, and didn't have the courage to look up at Mu Qiu. But suddenly, Lu Qingfei's shoulders sank. She subconsciously looked up and saw Mu Qiu slowly moving forward, untied the black windbreaker around his waist and put it on himself. Then, this eternal night Shura, who was feared by countless humans, bent down and covered the woman's injured thigh with his hand. A warm current came over Lu Qingfei. She knew that Mu Qiu was treating her, but she couldn't help but blush shyly. Don't you understand yet? This is the real you. Mu Qiu looked directly into Lu Qingfei's eyes with a smile, and an invisible spiritual wave was released. The latter looked directly into Mu Qiu's deep pupils, the blood color in his eyes faded, and his expression became empty. This world has long become an extremely evil abyss. It is ridiculous to want to find salvation from the abyss. What a stupid behavior. Warm TI. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 177. Madness. As Mu Qiu's bewitching words rang in her ears, the familiar words turned into the Sanskrit sounds of Tianting in Lu Qingfei's mind. For some reason, the scene of her teacher being killed appeared before Lu Qingfei's eyes. This is the truth she learned from the heterogeneous section to her. Her family member who was like a teacher and a father died at the hands of the Shenlong Society. This is also the reason why she has been frantically attacking and killing senior leaders of the Shenlong Society these days. However, in the repeated killings and revenge, Lu Qingfei also lost herself and gradually became obsessed with this morbid murderous intention. The angel in white in the past was already covered in blood and turned into a murderous witch born from the sea of blood. Trying to change the sick world is the most stupid behavior. The only thing you can change is yourself. Mu Qiu smiled and raised the woman's delicate chin. The slightly haggard look actually added a touch of morbid beauty to her delicate face. Change yourself. Lu Qingfei murmured to herself with dry lips, and her whole body fell into deep thought. Just like the bewitchment of the heterogeneous religion, Mu Qiu's words also used certain spiritual hints. But this is not some kind of mental control, it just allows Lu Qingfei to face her inner self. There are so many sufferings in the world, but you want to be the only salvation. You have been trying to suppress your true feelings, why can't you let yourself go? Mu Qiu's heavy words broke down Lu Qingfei's psychological defense layer by layer, and scenes from the past flashed quickly in Lu Qingfei's mind. Finally, when her emotions reached a certain critical point, something deep in Lu Qingfei's heart broke. She did not collapse when the apocalypse came, she did not collapse when she was besieged by many zombie monsters, and she did not collapse when her fiancé died. Only at this moment, the last psychological defense line of a strong-hearted woman was finally defeated. Concubine Lu Qing knelt on the ground and cried loudly, her fingertips scratching at the empty ground. Tears fell to the ground like a fountain, and she didn't care at all as she was so happy. She became confused as to what everything she had done so far was for, and what the meaning of survival was. At this moment, she only felt that the darkness around her was so dark that she couldn't see any light. Looking at the emotionally broken and crying woman in front of her, Mu Qiu always had a faint smile on her face. On the shoulder, a strange pink butterfly loomed, flying around Mu Qiu. After another long while, Mu Qiu bent down slightly and stretched out his hand to the collapsed woman on the ground. Come on, let me show you the true face of this world. The warm and familiar words reached her ears. Concubine Lu Qing raised her head, and the tears on her cheeks also fell down. Looking up, Concubine Lu Qing saw a white arm stretching towards her, followed by Mu Qiu's handsome face with a smile. Like the only ray of light in the dark night, something suddenly ignited in Lu Qingfei's heart. In the silent darkness, the woman in black looked sacred, and slowly stretched out her hand to the smiling man in front of her. At this moment, she surrendered her soul to the devil. It was at this moment that the smile on Mu Qiu's face became even bigger. He never doubted Lu Qingfei's choice. The palms of the two people held each other, and the red light in the depths of Lu Qingfei's eyes, which represented bloodthirsty and killing, became deeper and deeper. Even Mu Qiu didn't expect that one of his sudden actions would create a murderous witch who would be famous in the apocalypse. Dawn is about to break in the sky, and the dawn is faintly emerging on the distant horizon. In the dark, deserted street, Mu Qiu, wearing a white shirt, slowly walked out of the alley, with a nonchalant smile on her face. Suddenly a girl's cute laughter sounded next to her ears. I saw a pink monster butterfly flying out from Mu Chiu's shoulder, flying to the steps aside and dispersing into a ball of mist. The pink mist gradually condensed into the image of a girl wearing a red dress. Brother has such a bad taste, dragging that woman from one abyss into another. The girl was sitting on the steps, playing with her hair on her forehead with a smile on her face. Mu Chiu stopped, paused, and said to herself, "If a person loses his faith, he also loses the motivation to live. The best way is to recreate a belief in it." Mu Chiu was very interested in concubine Lu Qing's killing ability. It would be a pity to waste it in vain, so it was better to turn it into a force in his hands. So, he became her faith, her salvation. I just gave her a choice. Mu Chiu narrowed her eyes and raised the corners of her mouth. Regarding Mu Chiu's high-sounding words, the girl continued. Brother said he wanted to show her the true face of the world. Mu Chiu smiled and shook her head. Everyone has his or her own opinion on whether things are good or bad, and the world in everyone's eyes is different. The girl in the red dress eyes flashed, and she suddenly said, "Then what does this world look like in my brother's eyes?" "In my eyes." After hearing this, Mu Chiu looked up at the dawn on the horizon, and the rising sun appeared on the horizon. Very interesting, worth a try. This is Mu Chiu's most intuitive evaluation of this doomsday. The girl in the red dress laughed again after hearing this. The pink mist gathered again behind her, and the girl hugged Mu Chiu's waist tightly. Leaning on Mu Chiu's back, the girl smiled sweetly. As long as there is brother in Dire's world, it will be fine. Brother won't abandon Dire, right? The girl unconsciously grasped the corner of her skirt. Well, Dire will of course stay with me. The next second, Mu Chiu's reply reached the girl's ears, and the girl in the red dress flushed with excitement, burying her delicate cheeks in Mu Chiu's shoulder. The narrow eyelashes blinked, revealing her restless heart. Is it finally coming? Feeling the girl's breath behind him, Mu Chiu raised his head slightly and looked at the rising sun in the morning glow. With the arrival of the envoys from Zilan base and Dongshan base, he could clearly feel the tense atmosphere in the base. He could already feel that he was not far from his next check-in location. The Battle of Redemption. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 178. The purpose of the Yanjai organization and Shura's invasion of the base is just to rescue the bandage killer. Yuhei base, on the street between Shura and Wang Daipen. Xiao Hanyan looked at the mostly destroyed venue in front of him with a frosty face, and behind him were members of the law enforcement team including Wei Ying and Ji Yufeng. As dawn breaks, the black and red night gradually fades. The streets at this moment can be described as a mess. The originally flat and solid road had been burned to pieces by the hot flames, and the old high-rise buildings on both sides were also shattered and destroyed under the impact of the two violent energies. As for the men of the guards and the Shenlong society who were directly affected by the battle, most of them were turned into dregs, truly reduced to ashes. The land with a radius of several kilometers was shattered into pieces, and the residual heat from the flame explosion was still faintly heard on the ground. The residual heat of the heat sent a burning sensation through their skin. Many members of the law enforcement team stared dumbfounded at the astonishing scene in front of them, and the black and red flames in the middle of the night were still vivid in their minds. After being shocked, they couldn't help but feel extremely lucky to be a step late. No matter who of them entered this terrifying range that could be called the realm of death, they would not be able to escape death. Hearing Xiao Hanyan's inquiry, Wei Ying nodded. According to the surviving guards, after the Shura appeared, he blocked President Wang's fatal blow for Bandage Killer. Later, they used their overwhelming strength to resist President Wang's attack. The two of them fought for less than a quarter of an hour without a winner. Then Shura took the Bandage Killer and the black-clothed ninja and left through some kind of black hole space. Wei Ying succinctly told the situation at that time, and everyone around him couldn't help being shocked after hearing it. Being able to fight against the destruction level Wang Daipen, there is no doubt that this Shura's strength has improved again. Xiao Hanyan looked solemn after hearing this and murmured. Is this bandage killer really a member of the Yanjai organization? Just like the standard hooded robe of heterogeneous religion. Their previous impressions of the Yanjai organization were that the body was as black as ink and the pupils were as red as blood. The only exception was the leading general who called himself Shura. This is also the reason why Yuhei did not focus on the Yanjai organization before. Ji Yufeng, what do you think? Xiao Hanyan suddenly turned to look at the white-haired man aside. Ji Yufeng's views have always been calm and unique, and he has provided many constructive opinions in the base. However, the white god of death seems to be in a strange condition today. Ji Yufeng stared at the broken earth in front of him and the void where the black and red night sky met, and he was in a daze. Ji Yufeng. Ji Yufeng's expression was shocked. He came back from his thoughts, and turned to look in Xiao Hanyan's direction. What's wrong with you? Ji Yufeng shook his head and said indifferently. I'm feeling a little unwell, I'll go back first. After saying that, he moved his steps and walked away. It's just that for some reason, the back of this famous white god of death, who enforces laws in the base, looks a little bleak today. In a magnificent temple in the countryside of Yuhei, a middle-aged man with a stout figure held sandalwood beads in his hands and walked to a Buddhist niche in the main hall of the temple with a solemn expression. There was a futon spread in front of the Buddhist niche, and sitting on the futon was a short old man whose face could not be seen clearly. Zhang Qinggui walked up to the old man, bowed slightly, put his hands together and said, Master, just now the Yanjai organization and Shura invaded the base again. Next, the atmosphere in the entire room fell into an eerie silence. After a while, the short old man in front of the Buddhist niche said. The Buddha said that he did not feel any intrusion of evil forces. The voice is low, but full of energy. But when Zhang Qinggui heard the sentence, his eyes were horrified, and the look on his face was quite shocked. You mean that Shura invaded the base not from the outside, but from the inside? The words haven't been finished yet, but the meaning is already very clear. The base is now surrounded by destructive level spiritual shields laid down by Master Wufa. If outside forces want to invade, they will definitely attract Master Wufa's attention. Even the space powers such as Ji Yufeng cannot escape the energy detection of the mental shield, unless the opponent is also a strong person at the destruction level. But this time Shura's arrival was still silent and did not touch the protective shield at all. Does this mean that Shura is now in the Yuhei base? Zhang Qinggui's pupils shrank, and the shock in his heart could not be greater. A terrible thought came from the bottom of his heart. Brother, it's time to get up. In the early morning, a girl's sweet call reached Mu Chiu's ears. The warm sunshine shone down, and the sweet call woke Mu Chiu from her deep sleep. Mu Chiu slowly opened her eyes, and what she saw was a cute girl in a red dress, sitting astride her. Girl, what are you doing? Mu Chiu looked at the playful girl with a naive smile in front of her and pinched her temples helplessly. Although the bedroom for accommodation has been prepared on the first floor, this girl Dyer still runs to her bed from time to time, which gives Mu Chiu a headache. Wake up service, brother, don't you like it? Still. The girl suddenly leaned forward, her delicate face pressed against Mu Chiu's side face. Her rosy cherry lips rubbed against Mu Chiu's earlobe, and she spoke in a sweet voice. Ouni-chan. The moist touch came, and Mu Chiu's body shuddered instantly. At this moment, the girl raised her head, her pretty face flushed, with a sly smile on her face. Or does brother like Dyer like this? Mu Chiu, who was lying on the bed, stretched out his hands expressionlessly, pinched the girl's delicate cheeks, and then pulled. Pull. Girl. After a while, Mu Chiu withdrew his hands. Qin Mendi covered her red and slightly swollen cheeks, looked at Mu Chiu pitifully and said. Brother, what are you doing? Yu rolled his eyes. Be normal, how can a destruction level corpse king be so irritable? I remember you were not like this before. In my memory, my sister was also a good girl like Su Wen before, how could she become like this after experiencing the end of the world? Give me back my pure and lovely one. Hearing Yu's lecture, Qin Mendi's eyes flashed red, and the corners of her lips curled up and said, Brother, don't you know? When we are promoted to the destruction level, while regaining our sanity, the experience of killing and blood has also been infused into the depths of our souls. The way we think and the concept of looking at the world have long been different. We are no longer who we used to be. Hearing the girl's answer, Yu was silent. Yes, how is he the same as before? Chu, good morning. Just as Yu was lost in thought, Yuichi beside him woke up at some point. Yuichi rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked at Yu with a gentle gaze. Perhaps healed by the girl's gentle gaze, Yu's complicated heart gradually became clear. Good morning, Xiaoqi. Yu rubbed Yuichi's head, slowly got dressed and stood up. Next to him was a large French window. The warm light shone through the window, reflecting Yu's slender figure. Is there an important meeting to start today? I think therefore I am, no matter what happened in the past, he is now Yu. This is enough. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 179. Yu arrived at the familiar training base and followed the instructions to a spacious room. The whole room was extremely spacious, and the background was still a white bright curtain. At the moment, the room, which looked like a basement, was already crowded with awakeners in different clothes. At a glance, there were hundreds of people. But Yu knew that these awakeners were all high-level awakeners from the major forces of the base, including the law enforcement team and the search teams. The hundreds of awakeners present can be said to be the real backbone of the Yuhei base. The average strength per person is at the A level. Even figures such as Wang Daipen, Ji Yufeng, Wei Ying, etc. can be seen in the crowd. And on the high platform at the front, Xiao Hanyan, the highest person in charge of the Yuhei base, known as the Queen of Yuhei, stood there. Yu walked slowly to the front, and the people around him consciously made way for a passage with awe in their eyes. This is a privilege for the strong. After a while, a team of people wearing blue combat uniforms, who were obviously different from those in Yuhei base, came in. The whole audience was attracted by this team, and everyone who received the news also knew the true identity of this group of people. The special combat team of Zilan base. The combat team headed by Hianping came directly to the front of the crowd as soon as they entered the venue. Feng Jun, who was also from an outside base, immediately showed a flattering smile on his face after seeing Hianping and his party. The gap between their Dongshan base and large bases like Zilan base is too big, not to mention that they came here for a request this time. When facing Hianping, this middle-aged uncle was obviously not confident. Seeing the crowd below, Xiao Hanyan said calmly. The reason why everyone is called here this time is to discuss a major event concerning the entire Yuhei base and even all mankind. The cold and indifferent words spread throughout the venue, and there was silence, but everyone's expression was particularly solemn. As Xiao Hanyan finished speaking, the huge screen behind her also lit up. The picture inside was obviously shot from a high altitude, and below was a terrifying tide of zombies that could not see the edge. Countless tall figures and strange species roared and screamed in the zombies, and the oppressive atmosphere of terror was suffocating. The amazing energy fluctuations inside could be felt through the screen. This scene alone was several times more terrifying than the last zombie tide in Lannan City. As the camera of the picture kept zooming in, Everyone could vaguely see a relatively small human base standing there in the distance. The walls on all sides were not as tall as Yuhei, but just simple walls made of cement boards and goods piled together. This is the Dongshan base, which is hundreds of kilometers away from the Yuhei base. Xiao Hanyan said slowly, not long ago, a huge wave of corpses has migrated towards the direction of the Dongshan base. The number is no less than tens of thousands. Once such a small base is invaded by the corpse tide from afar, it will collapse in a moment, and the human survivors inside will become the food of the zombie monsters. The Dongshan base sent a call for help to the nearest Yuhei base and Zilan base. The screen behind Xiao Hanyan changed and turned into an electronic map. There were dozens of red dots of different sizes scattered on the map. And not far from the location of the Yuhei base on the map, there were also two red dots. This is the Zilan base and the Dongshan base. The three bases stand in a triangle in the northeast corner of the map. Based on the principle of mutual assistance among humans, after communicating with the Zilan base, we decided to launch a rescue mission for the Dongshan base together. In an instant, the eyes of the whole audience were focused on Xiao Hanyan. There was no noise or quarrel, because everyone was waiting for Xiao Hanyan's next words. Everyone present had experienced the end of the world for a long time, and they knew that if they only launched a rescue operation for this Dongshan base, they would not need to summon all their senior executives. But this rescue operation will span more than a dozen urban areas, including many urban ruins that are planned as dangerous, and a large number of people will be dispatched to plan. So, after the three bases discussed and decided together, they will thoroughly clear and attack the dozens of urban areas around the three bases, recapture human cities, and return a piece of pure land to the human world. As soon as these words came out, the whole place was silent at first, and then countless noisy voices sounded. Everyone present was a calm veteran. No wonder they had such a huge contrast before and after. It was really too shocking. They thought the base would make a big move, but they didn't expect it to be so big this time. There must be at least millions of zombie monsters in more than a dozen cities. How can this not make these awakened people who have been crawling in the ruins for many years feel terrified? Even though these zombies are generally low-level ordinary zombies, who can guarantee that they can come back alive under the sea of corpses? However, Xiao Hanyan looked around the scene, and the scene immediately fell silent. Xiao Hanyan's face was still calm. This time, Zilan base will also send people to assist us. At that time, the resources and land collected will be divided equally among the three bases. At this time, He Enping, the envoy of Zilan base, stood up. The main force sent by the base will arrive soon, and then we will work together with Yuhei base to annihilate the zombie tide. Only Feng Jun, the person in charge of Dongshan base, smiled awkwardly. The population of their Dongshan base is only 20,000 at most, and the combat power of the awakened ones is even pitiful. Even protecting the base has become a problem, let alone joining the rescue team. After the matter is accomplished, the three bases will also form a human alliance, and develop together, continue to expand to the outside world, recruit wanderers and survivors in the ruins, and become a real safe zone for humans to settle down. Xiao Hanyan looked around, with a solemn expression and an indomitable momentum. This ultimate battle concerning the fate of the human beings in the three bases, we call it the Battle of Redemption. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 180. This operation will recruit the vast majority of the awakened people in the base, leaving only some of the combat forces of the law enforcement team and the guard team to stay at the base. If there is conclusive evidence that someone is seriously ill and cannot participate in the battle, the law enforcement team must be informed for unified identification. When Xiao Hanyan said the main purpose of the redemption plan, the awakened people present were already whispering to each other and looking away. They have been struggling in the end times and have developed a slippery character of seeking good and avoiding danger. The battle code named Redemption sounds extremely dangerous, and they will lose their lives if they are not careful. Of course, they don't want to join. But how could Xiao Hanyan not see the ideas of these old-timers? With a stern look, she blocked their active thoughts in just a few words. After announcing the plan and purpose of the redemption operation, most of the awakened people in the conference hall were dismissed. Hundreds of high-level awakened people who got the news at the first time looked at each other, and they had not recovered from the news they just learned. But there is no doubt that when this news spreads, it will inevitably cause a great uproar. The sky of Yuhei base is about to change. There are only dozens of senior personnel representing various fields of the base left in the conference hall now. Xiao Hanyan has not yet made public some details of the plan. The Queen of Yuhei said. This rescue operation will break through from 4 aspects. The screen behind Xiao Hanyan changed again. On the enlarged electronic map, Yuhei base and the trapped Dongshan base were connected by 4 scattered red arrows. The 4 red arrows like passages just span the dozens of urban areas between the 2 bases. And these dozens of urban areas were also clearly divided into dangerous levels. At the same time, according to the intelligence from the front line, there are some noteworthy high-level heretics in these battles. As Xiao Hanyan's voice fell, a shocking beast roar suddenly came from the picture on the curtain. The deafening beast roar was accompanied by an unparalleled domineering majesty, as if reaching the depths of the soul. Even though they were separated by a screen, many high-level awakeners present were trembling. Suddenly, a white-haired tiger as big as a truck appeared on the screen. In appearance, it was no different from an ordinary wild tiger, but a pair of sharp fangs flashed with cold light, the eyes were red, and the domineering eyes made people dare not look directly at it. It was obvious that the camera was shot from the sky, and the huge body and strong muscle outline of the white tiger were clearly visible. But as the camera zoomed in, the white tiger on the ground seemed to have noticed something, roared, and looked towards the direction of the camera. I saw it wave its huge claws, and an unstoppable and infinite force directly shook the earth. When it is too full, it overflows, and countless spider-web-like cracks burst out from the ground. What's more terrifying is that this huge force is infused into the depths of the earth, and the cracks tremble. The building closest to the white tiger exploded under the action of this huge force that stretches across the earth. In an instant, rubble flew and dust rose up. The next moment, a huge monster with a shadow suddenly enveloped them. The last scene of the camera was a huge white tiger with its bloody mouth opened and pounced on them. Then, the picture became a blurry gray-white. With just one blow, the earth cracked and the tall building collapsed. This scene stunned all the high-level awakeners present. As powerful as this white tiger's terrible means, everyone present did not dare to say that they could confront it head-on. Just the domineering and powerful aura alone made them quite scared. Xiao Hanyan glanced at everyone and said, "This is one of the important targets of this battle, the red-eyed white tiger. Preliminary judgment, this is a destructive heretic." And no one noticed that the moment the red-eyed white tiger appeared on the curtain, Mu Chiu's eyes flashed with a cold light. As Xiao Hanyan finished speaking, the screen flashed, and the camera appeared again in the corpse tide that was about to surround the Dongshan base. But this time, in the deepest part of the corpse tide, there was a huge human figure like a tall building. When the camera zoomed in, everyone realized that the human figure was not a tall building, but a mechanical monster made up of pieces of rotten mechanical steel. A purple moth flew through the air, and as its wings fluttered, purple powder floated in the air, and countless zombie monsters that touched the powder were all corroded. But what was even more chilling was that the face of this purple moth vaguely looked like a human face. Destruction-level heresy, weird-faced poison moth. Seeing that many high-level faces were gradually becoming embarrassed, Xiao Hanyan's expression remained calm, and he slowly said, "In addition to the above-mentioned destruction-level monsters that appeared on the surface, there are some existences that need special attention." The screen switched, and in the dim urban ruins, blood-colored monster butterflies were flying in the air. When these blood-colored butterflies landed at low altitude, they suddenly dissipated into a pink mist. The zombie monsters below touched the mist, and their eyes were either dull or even more violent and bloodthirsty, and they began to bite and attack their companions frantically. In a short while, this area has turned into a bloody hell on Earth. Tianlai Novel Network. Under the city ruins illuminated by the dim twilight, a huge butterfly shadow can be seen faintly. This is a destructive monster in Lannan City, which is closest to Yuhei, the soul-devouring butterfly king. Information shows that the soul-devouring butterfly king has recently left the scope of Lannan City and is missing, but there is no guarantee that this destructive heretic will not appear again. Xiao Hanyan began to make a detailed analysis of the existence that may interfere with the battle situation. The evil heterogeneous religion, the mysterious Evernight organization, and some high-level zombie heretics in many areas. The comprehensive analysis made everyone amazed, and at the same time, the doubts in their hearts gradually faded. Being able to see the situation so thoroughly, I believe that the three bases have already made strict and comprehensive arrangements for this battle. Only Mu-Chiu stared at the picture on the screen without blinking. Finally, when the screen freezes on a certain scene, Mu-Chiu's expression becomes a little inexplicable. It is a humanoid monster with flames burning all over its body. Xiao Hanyan explained at the right time, since it disappeared in the ruins 3 months ago, there has been no intelligence showing the news of this S-level heretic. It is very likely that it has also broken through to the level of destruction. The terrifying existence that once dominated the red zone around Yuhei Base, the Flame Demon Lord.